An independent UN International Commission of Inquiry chaired by former High Commissioner for Human Rights Navi Pillay has released its latest report, finding that Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. The commission, which has been investigating events on and since the Hamas attack on October the 7th of 2023, concluded that Israeli authorities and its security forces committed 4 of the 5 genocidal acts defined by the 1948 Genocide Convention, which is at the center of South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Now, we also heard a report there a bit earlier on by our reporter Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who reported that the commission also found Israel to have blatantly disregarded the order for provisional measures indicated by the ICJ in January of 2024. For more on this now, we break this down for you with Ayesha Kajee, who's the former director of the International Human Rights Exchange Program at Wits University. Thank you so much for your time on the agenda. First, let's start by understanding, how do you think South Africa and the broader international community will treat this report? Will it be a decisive moment demanding urgent action, or will it be treated as an important piece in a longer legal process?
I think the latter, really. Good morning. Given that Israel has ignored with impunity the directives of the ICJ, the provisional measures set out by the ICJ to actually stop committing a genocide in Gaza, and given that many genocide scholars, including Israeli scholars such as Omar Batov of Brown University in the US, have declared that a genocide has been committed. The fact that the UN Commission of Inquiry has now done so adds a layer of evidence both to South Africa's case, now supported by other countries, at the International Court of Justice, which seeks to find that Israel is indeed committing a genocide in Gaza, and also to the case at the International Criminal Court against individuals such as current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So I think it would be part of a longer chain of evidence, but whether it would have any immediate effect on the ground in Israel is doubtful in the extreme, given that Israel seems to believe that it is invincible and seems to believe that it is allowed to commit a genocide, indeed a Holocaust, with impunity, without any repercussions.
And now here's another thing. The commission also names senior Israeli officials, which are, I'm keen to find out what would the diplomatic consequences be when a UN review singles out current leaders in the context of bilateral relations for regional stability and for the international forums. Could this accelerate any moves at the UN General Assembly or Security Council?
It ought to. Whether it will remains debatable, but it would certainly have repercussions for Israel, which is already becoming an international pariah. But the European Union, for example, and other regional blocs have begun debating whether or not to isolate Israel in terms of trade, in terms of cultural and sporting activities. This finding by the Commission of Inquiry, headed by a person as illustrious as Navi Pillay, our very own South African there, who headed the commission into the genocide in Rwanda, who is very au fait with what does or does not constitute a genocide in international legal terms. That will lend weight to those attempts to isolate Israel both politically and culturally and diplomatically. There have been calls for FIFA to, for example, prevent Israel from competing in the soccer tournaments, calls for Eurovision to sanction Israel by essentially excluding it from the music festival, etc. Certainly this type of finding will add weight to those types of calls. Increasingly, Israel will find, as South Africa did under apartheid, that it's becoming a pariah, that it's becoming isolated culturally, economically, and diplomatically. But whether that will actually make any difference to Israeli policy remains to be seen. Remember, while there are parallels with apartheid South Africa, the fact that Israel does not, as South Africa did, South Africa depended on black labor. Israel does not currently depend on Palestinian labor because it imports labor from allied countries such as India, which share its nationalistic agenda.
You make such an important point there. I need to pick up on it this moment. I mean, the ICJ has already issued provisional measures that we heard. Now, the Commission says Israel is blatantly disregarding them. So what does this mean in practice, particularly when a state ignores a binding order from a body such as the World Court?
Well, nothing in the short term, unfortunately, because the ICJ, until the case is concluded, which could take years yet, until the case is concluded, the ICJ doesn't really have any measures except the provisional measures, which are, in words. It doesn't have any direct action that can be taken in terms of halting Israel. But what the world could do, given that this is a world court, and if the United Nations General Assembly and particularly the Security Council agree, they could immediately slap sanctions on Israel, which thus far, of course, the Security Council has not agreed to any measures against Israel, largely because it is controlled by Israel ally, the United States of America, which is even more pro-Israel under the current right-wing Trump administration. So unless and until that changes, the imbalance in the Security Council is addressed. We've been talking about Security Council reform for about 2 or 3 decades now. It hasn't happened. And so the US still has a deciding vote and unfortunately can veto any attempts to sanction Israel through the Security Council, even any attempts to send a peacekeeping mission to protect the remaining civilians in Gaza. I mean, conservative estimates say at least 65,000 killed, at least 50 just this morning since dawn, civilians killed, and less conservative estimates go as far as 2, 3, 4, even 500,000 people killed. Now, in a population of barely 2.3 million, that's almost a quarter of the population if you go by the less conservative estimates.
All right, I must thank you so much for your time and insights right here on the agenda. That was Ayesha Kajee, who's the former director of the International Human Rights Exchange Program at Wits University. Thanks so much.